Thanks everyone for joining. So many different places. Appreciate you all taking some time out of your Tuesday morning to join us here today. So if you don't know me, my name's Tom. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Raisely. It's incredibly exciting to be presenting what has become quite an annual tradition for us, our 2024 fundraising benchmarks. I'm joined today by our head of data, Martin, who's joining us from Sydney today. And both of us have been spending a lot of time over the last 6 weeks, really this year, creating these insights and trying to give you something today that'll help your fundraising efforts grow even further in 2024. We're going to dive right in. So we've got a packed agenda. This session today is going to go for about 90 minutes with a bit of time for questions at the end. Understand there's a lot of time to take out from the day-to-day of your very busy organizations. And so just join us for as much as you can. We will be recording the webinar. So it'll be up on YouTube. It's usually about a day to turn that around. It'll probably be up on YouTube tomorrow if you need to catch up on anything. And of course, we'll send a follow-up email to everyone who's come along as well. We had 998, so 2 people off 1,000 people register for the webinar today. So we're incredibly excited to have so many folks here with us. And maybe next year we'll cross that 1,000 mark and get really close in. Before we get too far into it, I want to acknowledge that today I'm calling in from the Wurundjeri country in Hillsville, and I want to pay my respects to elders past and present of the Wurundjeri people in the Kulin Nation. Raisely's team operates all over the world and in so many places across the world. We work and live on stolen land. And as a company, we're committed to land rights and the return of power and reconciliation with First Nations people all over the world. Martin, where are you calling in today from?
Hi, Tom, and hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I'm in Lewisham in Sydney, which is on the lands of the Gadigal and the Wongal people of the Eora Nation, and they've had deep connections to this land for many centuries. I pay my respects to elders past and present as well. And just echo Tom's thoughts around Raisely's commitment to land rights, justice, reconciliation, going forward.
Thanks, Martin. All right, so what are we going to do today? We have a bit of welcome. That's the bit you're in right now. We're going to be talking a bit about your fundraising experience. We've tried to do something new this year, and we sent out a survey to a bunch of people. So we're going to be reporting back on that soon. But then we're going to be diving into the hard numbers. We're going to be looking at our donation benchmarks, regular giving benchmarks, and then we're going to end with peer-to-peer, a little bit on peer-to-peer fundraising and what works there. We're going to have some time at the end for some Q&A, so feel free to come prepared with your questions, and Martin and I will do our best to answer them live for you. And we're going to wrap at about 12:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time. That's in about an hour and a half. Little bits of admin. If you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A tab in Zoom. It's the 2 little speech bubbles called Q&A at the bottom of your webinar panel there. I'm going to ask you to pop them in there because when they go in the chat, they get lost. But feel free to use the chat to talk about what we're presenting, to discuss it. We would particularly love to hear if the information that we're sharing with you today really resonates with your experience, or if it doesn't. And if you feel like you've got a tip that you want to share with the hundreds of other fundraisers on the call today, then please pop that in the chat as well, because I really love these moments every year as we get together and share this knowledge ahead of what is going to be a big year of fundraising for everyone here today. So questions in the Q&A, use the chat. We've got a few polls that'll come out, and the session will be recorded. So I think with that we can move on in. Now, if you've joined and you're like, who the hell is this guy who says he's the CEO of Raisely? What is Raisely? Like, what am I? Where am I? Well, you're at a fundraising benchmarks webinar put on by Raisely, and if this is the first time you're hearing about Raisely, then welcome. Most of today is talking about our data and our analysis, but of course I'm going to put in a short sales pitch here and there as well. But Raisely is an all-in-one fundraising platform to power high-performing campaigns and charities right across the world. So many people here today use us for everything from their appeals to regular giving programs, peer-to-peer events, and ticket sales. Our platform is flexible. You can build whatever you want on it. It's entirely white label and comes with baked-in best practice. It's often informed by the data analysis that we do ahead of these webinars every year. So with that quick overview of Raisely out of the way, why are we all here today? Well, we're here because we love data a little bit too much. We all love benchmarks. But as a fundraiser in a charity, you probably don't have a good sense of how your campaigns are performing against the broader industry. You definitely would be in the numbers of your own fundraising data, but you're always like, oh, am I doing well? Am I not doing well? My campaign's a bit down or my campaign's a bit up. Is that me? Is it the industry? Is it the economy? It's all of these things that are happening that are outside of my control. And you've probably been to conferences, you've heard case studies up on stage, and then you're thinking, oh, but they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on ads and agencies. And you think, maybe one day that'll be me, but you quickly disregard the information you heard. And so we do this benchmarking process because we want to paint a really accurate and helpful picture of fundraising across a really vast data set of some of our smallest campaigns and our smallest organizations that are entirely volunteer run, along with our biggest, with big budgets and agencies and ad spends behind them. We've tried to make this not glossy marketing. This is the real data, the real truth. We've been statistically accurate. Martin's going to talk about it more in a second. But this data is to equip you to run more successful appeals, regular giving programs, and peer-to-peer campaigns. Raisely exists because I firmly believe that online giving is your biggest revenue opportunity. And we're all at Raisely excited to be here to help you accelerate it. So very excited to be sharing our uniquely broad perspective across thousands of charities with these benchmarks today. Martin, over to you to talk a little bit about our methodology.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, as Tom said, so we're really fortunate at Raisely, and we don't take the responsibility lightly, but we have lots of data from lots of different organizations. So to highlight, we've got over 10,000 campaigns on Raisely from 2,300 organizations. In the last 2 years, 320 million fundraising has gone through our platform from millions of donors and hundreds of thousands of fundraising profiles in peer-to-peer campaigns. So when we say broad, we really mean broad. And that's from organizations that, are raising millions of dollars a year, but also organizations who are just starting their first appeal, just putting together their first couple of regular givers, that kind of thing. And so one thing we need to be really careful of when we look at our data is trying to make sense of, well, what represents kind of the typical organization, and not letting some of those larger orgs overpower all the swamp all the insights that we might get from smaller orgs or medium-sized orgs. So I sort of think of myself as a statistician, maybe first and foremost, or at least it's a hobby that has become my job. Sometimes my partner will catch me watching a lecture on YouTube kind of on the weekend and be like, why aren't you watching something on Netflix? But I'll be watching a statistics lecture or something like that for fun, which tells you a little bit about me and what I find fun. But we love statistics and we take it really seriously. And as Tom said, this isn't a glossy sales pitch. It's real data that hopefully represents what can resonate with you and your experience, but also help you to make decisions going forward. We use medians, we use error bars to show the spread of data, and I'll explain a little bit when we come to that, but we kind of want to represent the typical organization and then show you what maybe the top 25% of orgs are doing and maybe the lower 25% of organizations are doing. At a couple of points also, we use some regression modeling to kind of control for confounding variables and control for campaigns and campaign types. We'll highlight that when we go along as well, but we just try and do things in a sophisticated way, but also hopefully present things in a way that's understandable and helpful to you. It's kind of the balance that we're trying to find as we go through these things. Most of that applies to when we're jumping into our Raisely data and data from people using our platform. But the first thing we want to talk about today is something new that we haven't done before, and that's a fundraising benchmark survey. So when you signed up for today's webinar, or you might have seen on our socials and things, you're invited to participate in a fundraiser experience survey. We're really excited about this. It's the first time we've done a survey like this, and it's something we've wanted to do for some time. The kind of hope and the purpose behind running this survey is, as Tom kind of prefaced earlier, we understand that things can be challenging for orgs out of there, and you can often feel like, am I the only one going through these challenges? Is it just me at my org? everyone else seems to be doing great and getting grants and um, ticking goals, but are we the only one doing it tough? And so in doing this survey, we hope to kind of provide a broader context of how that sector's feeling generally, and hopefully help you feel a little bit more connected and understand where you're sitting relative to those orgs as well. Yeah, so it's really exciting. We really appreciated there's kind of 200 plus people who filled in the survey, which is just an amazing result in terms of the responses, and hopefully it really, yeah, provide some useful information to you. So I'll hand over to Tom, who'll run through kind of the first results from the survey.
Some really exciting insights from this little survey. We'll race through them quickly, and then we'll get to the bigger number crunching that we've got as the main content for today. But we asked a few questions. Thank you if you filled it out. We had about 200 people fill it out. It'd be great for 2,000. First up, we asked how your organization's overall fundraising changed in 2023 compared to 2022. And it shows a really mixed experience out there in the world of fundraising. While half of us grew our fundraising, an incredible result, it's also been really tough at the same time, with about 28% saying that they decreased their fundraising in 2023 and 23% saying it was about the same. And our data aligns with this. When we look at our population of organizations who use Raisely, about 53% of them grew their fundraising on Raisely year over year last year. And so it's really been a mixed bag out there. If you're saying, oh, like I'm really struggling to hit my budgets this year, or I'm just not seeing the growth that I saw during COVID, then that's a pretty common story that we're seeing across many charities right now. But what we thought would be interesting is if we took that question and we split up our next one, which was which fundraising channel did you focus on in 2023? And so we wanted to say, well, for those who reported a decrease in fundraising, what were their focus channels compared to those which reported an increase? And broadly, we can see that organizations which grew were still adopting a real mix of fundraising channels. We're seeing a lot of diversification here. But we can see that organizations which increased their fundraising generally had a higher focus on online giving, but also on peer-to-peer fundraising and major gifts. All were playing larger roles. Direct mail played a smaller role, and peer-to-peer in-person events or fundraisers also a slightly smaller role. So certainly it seems like, and we saw this in the responses that people left us on the survey as well, that it was harder out there in direct mail, in corporate sponsorships and grants, and there was quite a lot of belt tightening and kind of across the economy. In-person events also slightly down. Looking beyond that, we asked kind of what you all think is going to happen in 2024. Do you think fundraising is going to be easier or more difficult compared to 2023? Apologies for the typo there. And really, the vast majority of you said that it's either going to be about the same or it's going to be harder. So we're not feeling super optimistic for growth in 2024, but that's okay. We're here to help. But it's good to know that that's kind of how we're all feeling. Oop, I'm a step ahead of myself here. So in summary from the data, we have learned that we pulled out a few themes. And why I talk through the... sorry, I've missed a bunch of slides. My things are glitching. I'm going to go back here. I want to rewind and reset. Okay. We also then asked you what challenges were most impacting your fundraising in 2023. And there were things like economic conditions really came out at the top there. Staffing challenges was a really big theme last year. And I remember just talking to fundraisers and having so many emails in my inbox being like, hey, Tom, do you know any great digital fundraisers? We're looking for one at the moment and they're really hard to find. But we also asked this question for 2024. And we wanted to ask kind of, what's the change? What's the difference that people are going to see between these 2 years? And although we hope cost of living pressures will come down, we see that staffing challenges is perhaps less of a concern in 2024. New donor acquisition, more of a concern. Competition, more of a concern, as well as donor fatigue, all being a little bit more important, a little bit more concerning in 2024. We're really committed to finding ways to make donor acquisition easier, and we're all ears if there's more that we can do. And I want to launch our first poll for the webinar today. I'm going to sum this up with a few key themes, but while I do that, I'm really keen to answer and ask a quick question, which is how can Raisely help you grow in 2024? Please give us your feedback. It'll go straight into our product process to understand how we can do better here. While you're answering that question, what were some themes from the survey? Well, firstly, acquisition and donor retention are getting harder. We've got challenges with home budgets that we're competing against, competition between ourselves as a charity sector, and advertising costs, acquisition costs, particularly on social media, are rising. We need to focus more on nurturing our base. We also learnt, and certainly in the responses, we really feel that charities are incredibly resilient and a critical part of the fabric of society. And so many of you reported it being tougher, but you got through. And this year's going to be similar, but we're going to get through. And all in all, it seems like most of our respondents were able to adopt to this new operating environment fairly well. Some themes we got from the comments were that access to trusts and grants and corporate philanthropy was harder than ever. We've seen that those resources are tightening up, and there were a bunch of comments saying that, particularly in relation to grants, the competition for those resources is favouring larger organisations with bigger teams to service those grants. And a bunch of people also mentioned that they were able to maintain their base throughout the year, but they're just receiving less from them. Donation averages have gone down. They're not seeing that kind of money come through, and that plus inflation and cost of living pressures have mean that as organizations, we're in a harder place when we haven't seen that income growth grow. So some really interesting insights from that survey there. Please pop your answer in that poll. I'll close it in a couple of minutes and we'll take that feedback all on board into our product team. Now let's turn to what the data has to say. We're going to start with our donation benchmarks, especially covering donation forms here. And I want to start with a bit of a conversation about conversion rates and donation form funnels. But to do that, we're going to start with a bit of scene setting. Raisely uses a stepped donation form. Since we built Raisely, we've always had a stepped donation form, and it was originally based on research that was done in the 2008 Obama campaign, the most extensive donation form testing, I think, even to date. And that research has proven that step donation forms work better consistently across so many variables than one-page forms. And we've seen this in e-commerce studies as well. The Baymart Institute in particular aggregates a whole bunch of e-commerce studies and presents that stepped checkout forms work better than one-page forms. So this is the Raisely form, if you're not familiar with it, because it's going to be important when we talk about funnels. It asks you the amounts that you like to give. These buttons are incredibly influential, and we're rolling out our first machine learning-based intelligent amounts feature to optimize those right now. Next, we ask you if you'd like to become a regular giver. Then you enter in your details. Hopefully you're not asking too much information here. And then finally, you enter your payment details in a secure form that is denoted as secure. There is an Apple Pay or a Google Pay option here as well if you've got it, and then you're completing your donation. Martin, over to you to take us through how this funnel performs on a typical campaign.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. So what we have here on this slide is our donation form funnel. And so this looks at the percentage of people that are kind of reaching each stage of that donation form flow. So what we see is that from the start, from page view, then 22% of people will select an amount on the donation form. And once they do that, once they sort of engage with the form initially, then from there, we have quite a really high retention rate of people. So it's quite sticky from there. So at that point, we'll show we only lose kind of 1% for the upsell step, which is a new step we introduced last year, encouraging people to change their gift from a one-off donation to a regular gift. And we'll talk a little bit more about the impact of that a little bit later in the webinar. Then 18% will enter their donor details, and 16% will ultimately make a donation. So once someone has engaged with the form, so that 22%, 16% will then make a donation. And so the kind of form donation rate is actually 73%. So once someone engaged, 73% will then go on to make a donation, which is quite a high retention rate for people engaging with the form. And we think it's important to consider that people come to pages with donation forms on them for a bunch of reasons, but we also do want to look at those who start making a donation and then kind of flow through the form from there. Once someone's made a donation, the kind of first benchmarks that we want to give you are these donation amount benchmarks. And so here I'm showing two things: average fundraising per donation and most common donation amount. But before I jump into the details of the numbers that are there, one thing I wanted to highlight is, sorry, so I just noticed someone asked, how do I get to the 73% again? So that's just 16% divided by 22%. That's 73% of the people who've actually engaged will ultimately make a donation. But back to this slide here. So just wanted to highlight, because we'll show you a bunch of graphs like this. So the dot here represents the average fundraising per donation for the median organization. And that's the middle organization across all of Raisely's fundraising, Australia and internationally. But the average fundraising is in Australian dollars. And the reason we show you the median organization, the average fundraising for the median organization, is because for that to shift, it's not influenced by kind of a really big organization or a really small organization. It reflects kind of the middle organization on Raisely, the typical organization, if you will. And for that number to shift, sort of the whole cohort has to shift. So to increase our average fundraising per donation by $10, which is what we see here from 2022 to 2023, it's not just one organization that has a big campaign full of thousands of dollars of donations. Really, everyone has to change their behavior and see a big shift across the population of organizations. And so we think it's a bit more of a robust measure in terms of representing all the data that we have. So it was an encouraging thing that we saw in 2023. The average fundraising per donation increased by $10, which is 10%, which I guess particularly with inflation in the background, it's necessary to kind of keep pace with that, just to keep treading water, as kind of people have talked about. But yeah, I think in the past we have kind of seen bigger increases as well. So we did see an increase in average fundraising per donation. On the right-hand side, you've got a similar graph that's showing you the most common donation amount. And so this isn't influenced by those big donations you might get of a few $100 or $1,000 or something like that. It's just what the most common amount most people are donating. And that's consistently been $50. And what we wish still was growing and with the same way average fundraising is. And we're doing a lot of thinking, as Tom noted, around donation amounts and particularly developing our intelligent donation amount feature. But yeah, $50 is the most common donation amount. One thing I guess to highlight here is that the top 25% of the organizations, which is the top of that bar there, they have a most common donation amount of $100. So it's not impossible to have $100 as your most common donation amount for an organization, but of course that it's just it impacts what numbers on your form and what you're asking your donors for, and depending, a range of factors influence what that amount is. The next thing we wanted to do is just dive into this average fundraising amount, and I'll also talk about the most common donation amount, and just see how it's working depending on the different type of campaign. So as Tom said, Raisely, you can use us for a whole range of different fundraising, all of your fundraising in one place. So folks who are using us for their donation form, they saw an increase in their average fundraising per user. Also for really across the board, appeals, peer-to-peer, we saw average fundraising increase in 2023 compared to 2022, which really, really exciting. I mean, that's exactly what we want to be seeing, and we need to be seeing, particularly with inflation bubbling along in the background. Yeah, the biggest increases were really on our donation form and appeals, but we also saw some increase for peer-to-peer. One thing I think to note here is around the Facebook fundraising. And so we've kind of taken the donations, I guess just to note, Raisely has an integration with Facebook fundraisers where you can take donations not on a Raisely donation page, but in the Facebook platform itself. And people can make donations and then that will get recorded in your Raisely account. I think to note here is what we've found is the donations that come through Facebook are smaller, and Usually they're part of a peer-to-peer campaign, and they're roughly half the size of the donations that you'll get on a Raisely donation page. And that probably reflects a lot of the work we've done in terms of the amounts that are presented on our forms, or the amounts you do when you set up your peer-to-peer campaigns. Tom and I were having a look this morning at some of the amounts that are on Facebook, and they're quite small amounts. Often it'll ask you for a $45 donation pre-filled, but it won't show you a range of amounts and those kind of things. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're putting together a Facebook fundraiser is the average donation amount. And yeah, there might be a bit of a trade-off there in that you'll get a spread, you'll get more people seeing it, but the average donation will be smaller. This one I'll just talk about very briefly, but it's just to note that $50 really is consistent across campaigns in terms of the most common donation amount, almost comically so. Two things I wanted to highlight. One is that for a peer-to-peer campaign, it's not a problem in the graph there. Like it's not, we haven't forgot to put a line. There are just so few organizations that have a peer-to-peer amount that's above 50. So peer-to-peer campaigns typically don't have a $100 as the most common donation amount. It really is quite sticky at 50. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is that we have seen an increase in the most common donation amount for Facebook fundraisers going from 20 to 50, but that hasn't actually moved the average fundraising amount, which is kind of interesting. But there has been that change there. I think over to you, Tom, to talk about funnels, but at a more granular level.
Yeah, thank you. So it's one thing to talk about this overall conversion rate, and it gets so much more interesting when we're cutting it by source. Finding your people and the channel in which you find your people is so critical for donor acquisition, and we can see that right across the spectrum. So we cut down that funnel that Martin's just talked through by traffic source. Direct being people who have unattributed, like they loaded up the website directly. Sometimes they can come from email. Sometimes there's a bit of a misattribution there. Email, we've been able to identify that they've clicked the link on an email. Web being like web referrers, other websites, maybe your organization's website. And then we've got those social networks and Google, of course, down the bottom there. What we see and what we expect to see is that high intention traffic, so direct email and web traffic, has a much better conversion rate than low intention traffic or social media traffic. Traffic which is often coming from posts or organic social or paid social and ads, increasingly so. And so we see an incredible overall conversion rate of 30% there and a high average gift around direct email and web. And that halves for Instagram. A little bit higher again for Facebook, where we're looking at overall conversion rates more of 12 and 11%. Google's really interesting. Google's a small portion of traffic. This will be things like organic search, paid search, coming through those channels. So there is some discovery going on here. Again, we've got a low overall conversion rates. We don't have very qualified, not high intent to donate traffic, but we do have a large donation. So that's super interesting when you think about your own strategies. The reason we want to break all of this down and give this to you is to pause briefly for some mathematics, and why I'm up here being someone who barely knows how to do maths, is to tell you just the practical realities of these benchmarks. And that is that we can take these numbers that we've given you today, and we'll share with you in an email afterwards, and you can use them to model out your appeals and your giving. So if you, for example, take the number of clicks that you think you can get on something, let's say you've got an email list of 10,000 people and you get a click-through rate on your average email of, I'm just going to use 10% for easy numbers. So you get 100 clicks. You could then times that by the conversion rate that we're giving you, the benchmark one, and the average gift to equal your income. Now, of course, you might have your own variations of these, but you can use these benchmarks to understand where you're at, or what you should be thinking about for a future campaign. If you're thinking about investing in a new channel that you haven't tried before, then use these benchmarks to give you a baseline to learn from for that channel. And so if I do that number on Instagram, for example, let's say I'm paying for clicks on Instagram. I'm using Instagram ads to promote my campaign. And I think that, 1,000 clicks at a 12% conversion rate and a $48 average gift is going to give me an appeal that races just short of $6,000. So that says that for me to break even, my cost per click needs to be about $5. And that's just break even. Like I'm not making a lot of money in that kind of scenario. So hopefully that's just to bring a bit of practicality to the numbers that we're sharing today, and how you can use them in your day-to-day strategy work of your campaigns. So I want to talk a little bit about our donation form and some. Oh yeah, man.
Sorry, Ty, I just thought, should we just pause briefly and I just whip through a couple of questions, maybe?
I think we can save them to the end.
Okay, all good. Yeah.
Just because we've got a lot to get through today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Raisely's new donation form and some changes that we made in 2023 to try to improve it, essentially. So I showed you our donation form before. The data I want to show you today is a couple of slides on how we got to the form that we have today. And beyond this being a great reason to use our donation form, if you don't already, I really just want to open our books and show you what works so you can copy it for your own donor experience. And in this analysis, we assessed the performance between our old form and the new form for organizations which switched over. So it's a really like-for-like comparison here. All right, first thing, fundraising per visitor through these changes went up a whopping 48%. This combines a few factors that we're going to be talking about today at different stages of our benchmarks presentation. It includes an increase in average gift, an increase in conversion rate of the form, and a large portion of that is an increase in regular giving. And we've got a whole section we're going to talk about regular giving. So it says that on average, every visitor to a website, we'd expect to get $6 when you kind of do all of the maths and you divide the amount of money you're getting by the number of visits you're getting to your website. It used to be about $6, and on the campaigns that switched over, it moved up to an average of about $9, an increase of 48%. So that's a really huge increase. It shows that your donation form is incredibly important to how much you're able to raise online, even the donation form on your website. They're incredibly influential to donor behavior. Let's break down that increase a little bit more. That increase in fundraising, overall, the 48% increase, comes from a 19% increase in conversion rate and a 24% increase in fundraising per transaction. So more people are converting through the form. That's assisted by things like payment logos down the bottom of the form, a really nice, animated, smooth, trustworthy donor experience, security, affirmation on that final step, having Google Pay, Apple Pay as important options there. All of those things combine to be a 19% increase. And then average fundraising transactions, so we found that people wanted to give more through this form. So we saw a higher average gift through the trust and confirmation that the form was able to process that. And of course, then a big part of that 48% is due to our regular giving upsell, which, speaking of, we're going to talk a little bit about regular giving now. And while we do this, I'm going to launch a quick poll on regular giving, and we'll share the results back once Martin's talked through our regular giving data.
Thanks, Tom. So regular giving. It's something we're really excited about. It's something we spent a lot of time thinking about last year, and put a lot of energy in. And the reason is because regular giving is really important, and I think we've come to see that at Raisely and see the impact that it can have for organizations. You can provide that kind of steady stream of revenue that you need to dream big in December when you're not running a campaign, but you can still have some money coming through the door. And it can also be a way to develop lasting relationships with your donors, for them to continue to see value in your organization, maybe become involved in it another way as a volunteer or a peer-to-peer support, those kind of things. So it's a really great way to stay connected and also to have a steady stream of revenue. I'm going to talk through three things here. One is like, who are these regular givers, or what's the impact of regular giving? How long do regular givers typically last for? And thirdly, like, what's the average or typical donation amounts that regular giving people are making? And then Tom's going to talk through the regular giving upsell. So what's the impact of regular giving? So across all of Raisely, roughly 6% of people are regular givers. They participate in regular giving as at least part of the time. But that same 6% of people contributes 24% of the fundraising that we've seen on Raisely. So what that means is that typically um, the, a regular giver has given 4 times the amount as a one-off donor, which is a massive impact. And I guess, as we say there, it's a small group with a big impact. And the last point there is something that we talked about at last year's 2023 fundraising benchmarks. When we look at regression analysis and we look at what are all the different factors that can go into a successful campaign on Raisely or associated with a successful campaign, regular giving is typically the one that comes out the most. Campaigns that have regular giving in them, even things like peer-to-peer campaigns, which can be a bit strange, that having regular giving is associated with doubling the size of the campaign in terms of fundraise. So it's a really important strategy. I think our encouragement would be, if you haven't thought about it or you're just starting out on your regular giving journey, it's something that we'd really encourage you to continue going down that path. And of course, we're here and can support you in whatever ways we can as part of that. But a small group with a big impact. The next thing I want to talk about is how long do people stay around as a regular giver? And 24 is the magic number in terms of the number of donations that you should expect from someone when they sign up for regular giving. And that kind of it uses a relatively sophisticated analysis called survival analysis, but it kind of captures the fact that you'll have some people who'll stay with you and keep being a regular giver almost forever. We've had people since we launched this feature more than 7 years ago, still donating regularly to the campaign that they signed up 7 years ago, which is a really beautiful thing. But you'll have another group or a substantial portion who'll only give for a year or a shorter period than that. But when you kind of average across all those different things, 24 donations is the magic number. And the vast majority of people that are giving monthly, so that's around 2 years that you can expect someone to participate for. What's important about that 2 years? Well, that's 24 donations. If that's a $10 donation, that's $240. If your average donation is maybe $100 or $70, it's still 2.5 times or more that for one regular giver signed up. So they're a really high value group of people, and those little donations add up over time, which makes where all that impact comes from. So here is the final thing that I wanted to touch base on is just like the size of these regular givers. And so when we convert all of our regular donations into a monthly schedule, so take the weekly and multiply by how many weeks there have to be a month, and when we divide yearly by 12, the average monthly fundraising increased just slightly in 2023 from $36 to $38 Australian. So that's sort of the typical regular giving amount that you can expect. On the right-hand side there, I've listed the most common regular giving amounts and their frequency. So 9 of the top 10, the top 9 are all monthly amounts, and they're all $100 or below. So that they are going to be smaller amounts, but they do add up over time. The 10th amount there is $5 a week, which some people do prefer to give. I'm going to hand back over to Tom, who's going to highlight that kind of key part of our donation form, which is the regular giving upsell.
Thanks, Martin. I think this stuff's so interesting. I mean, like in my conversations with fundraisers, often it's a lot of nervousness around how much you ask for regular givers. And I think what this perhaps shows us, particularly in those higher amounts there at the 50 and the average monthly fundraising of nearly $40 a month, is that it's okay to ask regular givers a little bit more than maybe what feels comfortable, because generally they're happy to give it. And we found that in our upsell research that I'm going to go through in a second. But before I do, let's end this poll and report back on the results. And what we've found, go share those results with everyone. So of the folks who answered the poll, thank you if you did. The vast majority of you, 48% of you, have said that you do have a regular giving program, but it needs love. And so maybe 2024 is the year of giving your regular giving program a little bit more love. awesome that 20% of the folks here have a really well-established regular giving program. If you were one of the people who said that your regular giving program is well-established, maybe you could pop some tips in the chat for the folks who say that a regular giving program needs love. Incredible to see, and I think pretty typical that almost no one here doesn't have regular giving as part of their organization, and there is a good group there who perhaps would benefit from a regular giving program in the future. It really can be such an important bedrock of sustainable and recurring revenue for you to plan long-term impact against. So yes, please, if you've got a great humming regular giving program, pop your tips in the chat and share them with everyone who's going to give their program a bit of love in 2024. All right. I want to talk about our regular giving upsell. This is the second step of the donation form. When you choose an amount as a once-off donor, you are asked to instead convert that once-off gift into a regular gift. You can kind of see it there operating on your screen. We give a donor three choices really. Donate their once-off gift monthly, donate half of their once-off gift monthly, and keep their one-time donation. This upsell was one of the most extensive experiments that we've ever run at Raisely. And we're really excited to report back these results, and you can kind of think about how these apply to your own forms. The first thing was that over 100,000 users saw this experiment. And we find overall that having this upsell in place in a donation form doubles the proportion of visitors who sign up for regular giving. And so that means that with the upsell on, more than 1% of visitors to a fundraising page sign up for regular giving. And of course, this is only counting visitors to campaigns that have received regular giving or are promoting regular giving. So it's pretty good analysis here. Before the upsell, we would expect that to be about half that. About 0.6% of visitors are going to sign up for a regular gift just by choosing a regular gift in one of the options at the top of the form. After the upsell, we're doubling that to 1.3%. So it's a really massive effect that we see this upsell has. We also noticed that the regular giving upsell increases your regular gift amounts. Very, very slightly. This analysis was a little bit earlier than some recent changes we made to the form as well. So we can see that broadly, people who are upsold are accepting either the same or a slightly higher amount to what they would have otherwise chosen if they weren't upsold a regular gift. And the really interesting stuff we did here is we were about to launch this kind of very complex machine learning optimization of the amounts that you're shown on a donation form. And we had a bunch of data gathering, and we ran some analysis, and it just turns out that if you ask people the same amount that they were going to give and to convert that monthly, that is by far the best option. Like there isn't actually there isn't much room to optimize this amount here. But then what we did is we added a 25% amount, a $25 or a 50% amount. So if I was donating $50, my options are $50, $25, or keep my $50 once-off gift. And we found that meant that we onboarded more regular givers for the same amount of overall fundraising volume. So there's certainly a few smaller gifts there than what we're seeing. We're still paying back that once-off gift in 2 installments. And then from everything from there is more fundraising for your organization. And so we think that overall this upsell is increasing the average regular giving donation simply because we're actually asking someone to convert what was once a once-off gift into a recurring gift. So that's incredibly exciting. There was no negative impact on conversion rates by introducing the upsell step. They didn't drop. People are very happy to skip through it. And this doubling effect is super substantial when you model this fundraising out. And for this analysis, we looked at 18 months. Martin just said that the typical regular giver lasts about 24 months. So we were just super conservative and we said 18 months. And when we model all of that out, more regular givers donating for about 18 months. Overall, fundraising per user or per visitor to your website, unique visitor to your website, increases by 6.5%. The regular giving is incredibly important. Having an upsell is incredibly impactful. we're up to our last section of today. There's a bunch of questions coming in the chat, and we'll be able to get to all of those at the end. I think we're going to have plenty of time for questions. So please feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A box, because we've got a list of them there. We'll all come back to them at the end of this session. But last section of today is peer-to-peer. If you're a community fundraiser and you are getting sick of all of this individual giving talk, this is your moment. We're going to talk about peer-to-peer and events. Peer-to-peer fundraising on Raisely encompasses fitness challenges, virtual events, physical events like walkathons. They are mass market with thousands of participants raising small dollar amounts, to high net worth events where participants are raising thousands of dollars per fundraising page. It's a really broad spectrum. Some events raise millions and some raise thousands. We've seen that time and time again, peer-to-peer fundraising is a robust strategy to add to your fundraising mix. It brings diversity to your income. It brings it brings in new supporters into your organization. It brings in a broader base of potential regular givers at the end of the day. And it's a great activation opportunity. It's a great way for people to become more aligned to your cause and do more to support you than just simply open up their wallet, pull out their credit card and make a gift. Now, all of that's true. It is becoming increasingly competitive to run peer-to-peer campaigns, particularly in Australia and New Zealand, where a lot of us are calling in from today. It's much harder to find traction in this market than it was a few years ago. And I think from my conversations I've been having with fundraisers recently, most of you are having a mixed experience with peer-to-peer. Some events are declining, struggling to bring new participants on board, but others are experiencing healthy, albeit probably modest in most cases, growth year over year. So it's a really interesting environment to operate in. I'm going to launch our last poll of today, which is about your peer-to-peer plans in 2024. Again, at the end of this, before we move to questions, we'll share the results, but I'd love to hear how you're feeling about peer-to-peer fundraising in the year ahead and what your organization is planning. While I launch that, Martin, do you want to take us through our data?
Thanks, Tom. So we're going to look at our peer-to-peer funnel, which is similar in presentation to our donation form funnel. And I guess just before I jump in, I just wanted to highlight that our peer-to-peer form has roughly 4 stages. It's not the same as our donation form in that they're often customized and can have some more steps to it, but we kind of break them into 4 rough stages, which is viewing the sign-up page, coming up to the sign-up page, completing your details, which is like entering some personal details, completing information about the profile, so whether it's a team, if it's a team name, any other, maybe a goal or other things that are associated with the profile, and then the sign up succeeding. So that might include paying a registration fee or doing a donation as well, a bunch of other things. So our peer-to-peer sign up forms are quite flexible. You can do lots of different things with them, and often they can have quite a few pages in them, but it's 4 broad steps. What we see is that overall, from someone viewing the sign up page to completing a sign up, it's roughly 30%, 3 in 10 people will actually do that. And Tom, actually me in a second, we'll go through kind of the distinction between the different channels in that. But a couple of things I just wanted to highlight about the channel overall. One is that 41% of people will engage with the form. And so from that 41%, ultimately, 70% will be retained and the sign up will succeed. So that 70% is just 29 divided by 41, which is how you get a kind of retention of 70% through the form. A key point here is that there's a kind of quite a big drop off. We see like 9% of people dropping off between that details completed and that profiles completed stage. And so one thing we wanted to highlight and maybe encourage folks to think about this year is what can you be doing to trim down that profile stage to make it as seamless and as straightforward for folks to complete your sign-up process. There can often be a lot of information in those things, and you need information to run a proper peer-to-peer process. You need all the information about the person signing up. That's very understandable. But we do see people dropping off at that stage of the form. And so there are things that you can be doing there to help people complete. And then sort of 3% of people will drop off at the sign up stage, but it's not as dramatic as before they complete their profile. Just something to think about, maybe as you're developing a peer-to-peer campaign for this year. As we did with the donation form, we also wanted to split things out and look at channel. So these are kind of the same channels that we looked at for the donation form. You've got the kind of big ones that we saw previously, direct, web, and email on there, though they're not at the top. Firstly, I'll just touch base on direct. So someone who's punching in your address, saying, I want to sign up for this peer-to-peer campaign, roughly 1 in 2 of them will ultimately sign up. And we see a similar kind of pattern, though less drop off at the profiles completed stage. Google and web also have high conversions and the kind of overall picture. So this is people searching for you or maybe being referred from another web page. Email is an interesting one in that, but this could reflect a bunch of things. One of the things we've kind of talked about is maybe it reflects people who are on your contact list in your database who've made a donation to your organization. And one of the harder things that we know orgs have is converting a donor into a fundraiser. And one of the best ways, or one of the things I think you need to do in order to do that, is to nurture that donor and send them regular emails, communicate the value of your organization in the lead up to a peer-to-peer campaign, but also just throughout the year so that they understand what you're doing, maybe through a regular newsletter or something like that. The two last channels there are kind of the social channels that we've highlighted today, which is Facebook and Instagram. And as you can see, they have kind of the lower conversion rates in terms of coming to the page and then making ultimately signing up for a peer-to-peer campaign. I don't think that's surprising in that they're kind of the lower qualified levels of traffic that you'll get, but they're also the places where you'll find people who haven't come across your organization before. You don't have their email address. They haven't made a donation to you, but they might follow you on a page or know someone who follows you or these kinds of things. So that's where you're going to get new people coming to your organization, but they do have lower conversion rates. Though not tiny conversion rates at the same time. You still, I think that's 19 or 18 and 14%. So things can vary quite drastically across different sources. Our final benchmarks for today. So the last few things that we wanted to talk about are some kind of key benchmarks that you can use when you're thinking about your next peer-to-peer campaign, and particularly things that you can use in terms of modeling and forecasting. Here's my budget. Here's where I think I'm going to get traffic. Here's where I'm going to get people signing up. How many people are going to sign up? So 3 benchmarks here: profile activation rate, fundraising per activated profile, and number of transactions per activated profile. So the profile activation rate is the number of people who sign up. Some of them won't actually end up doing any fundraising. And we talked a lot last year about all the different things that you can do to encourage folks who sign up and create a profile for your peer-to-peer campaign. You've spent all this effort getting them to sign up. There's a few things you can do to encourage them to actually do some fundraising for them to have a success and for success for your organization. So we saw a big increase in our profile activation rate last year. That went from 68% to 78%, which is great, and probably reflects that more people are the people who signed up for peer-to-peer campaigns were more qualified last year. I think I probably forgot to note that we didn't see kind of a bit of a trend of lower numbers of people signing up for peer-to-peer campaigns, but those who did activated at a higher rate. And so we probably saw roughly similar numbers of actual profiles fundraising more here. The second is the average fundraising per activated profile. So this is when you take all the fundraising for a peer-to-peer campaign and divide it by the number of activated profiles. How much did each of them on average fundraising? And it might not surprise too many of you, but we did see a decline in that last year. So that went down roughly 30% from $466 to $302. Some organizations saw an increase, but kind of overall, there was a decrease in average fundraising per profile. And that's largely associated with a reduced number of transactions per activated profile. So those people who were participating in a peer-to-peer campaign or fundraising on behalf of your organization, they struggled to get the same number of donations that they did the previous year. That might be due to things like less reach on Facebook, which we know has been kind of a trend for the past couple of years. It might just be also things like cost of living, where people have less money to be able to support their friends or in a challenge or something like that. Tom's going to talk through our math whiz for today. He's going to talk through the kind of way you can use these for modeling.
Not at all a math whiz. Martin once sent me one of his statistics lectures on YouTube, and it starts with this like weird scene that is very sci-fi, and I started listening to it and was confused about a minute in. Thanks for that, Martin. So it's some really interesting insights there that for us to talk through. I think if you're been with us for a few of these benchmark webinars, we've also included like factors that influence successful fundraising. And I just wanted to call out, we haven't put those in this webinar this year, and that's because they haven't changed. And so we ran that analysis and they largely didn't change. So if you would like to know what kind of activities someone needs to do, what kind of engagement things, what kind of attributes we'd look for in successful peer-to-peer fundraisers, both in things that move towards activation and also things that move towards the amount you fundraise, then we've probably included in the follow-up email, but that's online. That's on our YouTube channel. You're welcome to watch last year's benchmarks webinar to check that out. But it's super interesting that activation rate going up to 78% is massive. When we first started doing these benchmarks pre-COVID, I think the first might have been back in 2019 or 2020, and that activation was more at 50%. And so to see that increase like it has over the last few years really shows an incredible amount of maturity and skill that's come to peer-to-peer for all of the fundraisers here. I am going to talk about maths. I understand we're at the hour. If you have to drop off because you've got another meeting, that's okay. We're going to go through a bunch of questions. We're going to dive into this in a bit more detail. But if you do log off, you will be shared your browser will open up a quick Google form, which is a survey of how you found today. We'd love it if you could fill it out because that feedback is incredibly helpful for us to make sure that we're presenting content to you that's super interesting and useful. But before we do that, I'm the numbers guy, apparently, much to my horror. And so let's talk about how these numbers might hit the road when you're actually planning out your peer-to-peer campaign. And again, it's an incredibly simple formula, but I just want to outline this for you so that you understand how you can use these benchmarks in your day-to-day fundraising strategy work. So the first thing, again, we look at visitors to your website. That might be clicks from a particular source. It might be email, it might be Facebook, it might be Instagram. We times those by our conversion percentage from our slide a little while ago. We times them by our activation rate of 78%, and we times them by our average fundraising of 302. And that equals our income for our fundraising for our peer-to-peer event. And if you're an organization who is experimenting with new strategies, I'll share the results of this poll, experimenting with new strategies, like 40% of you are, running more campaigns, like 13% of you are, or thinking about starting doing peer-to-peer fundraising, then you can use these benchmarks as a really solid foundation for you to build upon. Now, an example here is that Instagram, you've got 1,000 clicks on Instagram, 14% conversion rate overall, 78% activation rate, and 302 average fundraising per profile. Means that my campaign, if I'm able to get all of those things, will raise about $33,000. It means that to break even, our max cost per click is around $33, and I'm sure that there are digital advertisers yelling at me from their screens being like, don't optimize for cost per click, and that is true. So always make sure for your social platforms, you're optimizing for cost per acquisition. And when it comes to acquisition, it's so important that you find your right audience for these benchmarks to work or for you to even exceed them. We've seen campaigns that have put out really broad advertising through like the Google Display Network or through display ads that get loads of traffic to pages, and it just doesn't convert, and the conversion rate is super low. At the same time, we've seen organizations really find their niche on Facebook or Instagram and have really high conversion rates for fairly low cost. So there's a lot of magic in advertising, and particularly in peer-to-peer. We're not experts in it as much as I would love to be. Yeah, certainly optimize for cost per acquisition and make sure you find your audience. Otherwise, you'll see these benchmarks and really change and drop. So for those who filled out the poll, thank you for doing that. Really interesting results. 40% of the folks here today are experimenting with new strategies in peer-to-peer. When we started the session, I noted that a big theme from our survey that was responded to by 200 people was that charities are resilient and good at adapting to change. And that seems only true from that strategy. If folks are experimenting with new things, then we're going to see a whole lot of innovation in this space in the year to come. That's super exciting. If you're willing to share what you're going to experiment with, please pop it in the chat. I think everyone here would love to hear it. If you want to keep it under wraps, that's okay too, but the more the merrier, I think. Interesting to hear that 20% of you don't do any peer-to-peer fundraising, and it's good to see that a few more are running more campaigns than are running less. We have covered so much today. We have about half an hour left in the session. I don't think we're going to need it, but we do have 18, I can see, questions that have come through. And we really wanted to make sure we had time today to answer loads of questions and go into depth here with the folks who are attending live. If you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A tab in Zoom. And I think it's going to be mostly Martin answering and me moderating, which is totally fine. But of course, if all of this numbers talk is convincing you to do the math on Raisely, sorry for the cheesy sales pitch, there's a QR code where you can book in a demo with our team there at Raisely, or just go to raisely.com/demo. We've covered donation forms, we've covered industry insights, we've covered peer-to-peer, we've covered regular giving, and there's loads of opportunity here for you to improve. So we're going to go to some questions, pop them in the Q&A. We're probably not going to do audio just because it always is a bit of a mess with people's audio not working and those kinds of things. So pop your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as you can. If you need to drop off, then totally fine. Thanks for joining us today, and please fill out that survey. All right, Martin.
I'll just pick up some and take
go for it. Yeah, and I'll find some good ones there. If you've got a Martin's top picks, go for that.
No, it's all good. I'll just kind of move through the ones that I can speak to with some level of confidence. Some things I haven't looked at, and sometimes things I haven't looked at in a while. Laura asked, do you see a drop-off in donations if the address field is mandatory rather than optional? I think we have had a look at this, and we didn't find a massive effect in terms of address field. But I think one thing to think about there is also there's just privacy consideration. So if you're capturing addresses, that's private information that you've got to look after. And I think one of the considerations you want to have in terms of capturing data is capturing data that you really will and need. And of course, that address can be useful for direct mail and for lots of different things, but we just recommend keeping the form to what information is needed. Craig has asked, do you know the typical spread of donations from different campaigns using 20, 50, 100, 200, your choice? The answer is we have so many campaigns on Raisely, and it's a really, really wide spread. Probably the thing that we're learning is that orgs can probably ask more than they are currently asking. So we see a lot of orgs putting a lot of small donation amounts on their forms, and that can bias people. So we ran an experiment actually last year where we just took donation amounts for orgs that had opted into our experiment and times them by 1.5. And we saw that increased fundraising by at least a few percentage points. So my encouragement and what we're doing as part of this intelligent donation amounts is probably just starting to shift donation amounts higher, and we're not seeing a decrease in conversion rates. We do see people entering an amount that's lower than what's on the form, but they're still converting. That's sort of the best answer I can give on the kind of spread of donation amounts at the moment. Explaining in terms of our intelligent donation amounts, we're still working on that feature. It's in beta at the moment. I guess the way that we're thinking about it is organizations don't have the opportunity to run a little A/B test on their donation form and try a bunch of different amounts. And so we want to make the feature basically finding the best amounts for your campaign, and then also finding the best amounts for this device or users in this currency and those kind of things. But to kind of make the power of A/B testing, which we've found hugely helpful for us in building Raisely, available to every organization and every campaign that's run on Raisely. That's how we see that feature, and we'll be talking about that more in the next weeks and months in some sort of where we are. Yeah.
There's a interesting question from Natalie, which might be helpful because in a few of these slides, we've talked about per visitor or per user numbers, particularly in conversion rates. And Natalie was asking particularly in relation to our new donation form when we say that we expect $6, now $9 in return for every person who visit our website. Natalie's asked, can you clarify what you're including in this? Are there organizations you're including that offer services from their website as well? And would we still expect the same return per visitor on a typical Raisely campaign?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. It's a really important question because it's sort of something we have to think about very hard when we're doing this A/B testing and developing features and doing tests. And what we do is in the models, we account for campaign and organization, which is sort of like accounting for all those, they're really widespread. So the website that has a donation form, but then it's primarily there for something else. Maybe it's for accessing services, to the one that's super highly optimized. Folks want to get folks there and get a donation as much as possible, and really focused on that. And so we have to average across those all. So those like $6 amounts and $9 amounts, they're actually really, they're really variable. They're sort of internally consistent in terms of when we run that experiment, we think that's the best measure that we can get in terms of what difference this is making. But we can run a different experiment with a different set of campaigns, and they'll have a different set of amounts. So those are the kinds of things that as we're building, and again, we're making promises, but as we're building things like dashboards and things on more data-driven dashboards in Raisely, we really want to put that information in your hand so you can see how your campaign performs. Which is getting close to in terms of our roadmap and things. We're really excited about the kind of dashboards that we can provide.
Yeah. Vicky's asked a tricky one, which is I'm just now trying to see if we can stump you, Martin. Vicky's asked, do you suggest upselling regular giving to peer-to-peer donors who primarily support their friend? Is there any data around success of engaging those kinds of donors? Understanding, which I would agree with, is that they primarily donate to support their friend. They're not interested in a long-term relationship with our organization. And I remember in our analysis, you were saying that peer-to-peer, regular giving in peer-to-peer campaigns, although it is weird, is also really successful. Do you remember any other insights on how that works?
Yeah, and that was from last year. That was before we had the upsell. And I haven't had a look explicitly at the upsell in peer-to-peer campaigns in terms of performance. My sense is it doesn't really turn people off. People still want to make a donation. And I've seen some of our really, really big campaigns have left it on. And it's probably something we should check and go into a little bit more. But also my suggestion maybe is it doesn't have to.
That was our lesson, is that if people want to donate, like even a handful, if people want to donate regularly to a peer-to-peer campaign, then it might be worth a go. But I hear you, Vicky, on it being a bit of an odd thing when you think about
absolutely
as an overall strategy. We've got a few product ones. Martin, will you release the beta for the intelligent amounts, where Jojo's wanting to run an RG uplift campaign to our regular donors? Would this be something that is useful? How do folks opt into the beta?
For intelligent amounts. So if you go to where you set your donation amounts in your campaign Raisely. So I think it's campaign donation for amounts. There's just an option there to turn on the beta. At the moment, it's not optimizing regular giving amounts, but they will see a regular giving amount through the upsell if the upsell is turned on. But at the moment, we're just initially starting with one-off amounts.
Good stuff. There is probably another good question here from Craig that speaks a little bit to the methodology, and then I can answer a few more product-related ones, Raisely-related ones. Craig's asked, could the decreased donor success and lower total raise, this is in relation to the peer-to-peer benchmarks we just shared, be the result of organizations coming on board with less mature peer-to-peer programs? Do you want to talk a little bit about how we control for organization size in these benchmarks?
Yeah, I think, and you'll probably come to this in terms of experience from larger orgs, but as I was kind of noting at the start, the benchmarks reflect the median or middle organization. And so we do that so that those really big organizations, but also those really small organizations who there are a few of them, but there are lots and lots who are just starting out in terms of their peer-to-peer journey. They don't have too much influence. And so I think the median is a pretty good reflection of the cohort as a whole. And Tom, maybe you want to speak to this more, but we have heard of like big peer-to-peer campaigns that have done it tough in the last year compared to previous years.
Yeah, I think that's true. Like we've really worked hard in these benchmarks to control the organization size, because we've got some very small ones which would draw it down and some very large ones that would pull it up. So that's why we're using medians, and we're doing these controls for organizations. These should be really thorough. I mean, it's like there are some really dumb stats out there. I think one of the things we did is, if we wanted to say in our marketing material that adopt Raisely and grow your organization by an average of 80% year over year, that would be statistically true, but not a fair a representation of the typical organization on Raisely. And that's just because some organizations grow really quickly and others don't, and that skews things like averages. And so in this data, we're trying to be very representative of the typical experience of an organization on Raisely. There's a few rapid fire product questions that I can answer. It could just be a bit of a sales pitch for our various features. Patricia's asked, is there a direct debit option for regular giving? There absolutely is. We launched it partway through last year. If you're in the UK or in Australia, direct debit is available. If you're in New Zealand, it's hopefully coming soon to Stripe. And if in the US, let us know, and we'd love to add support for that in the future. And we're just keen to get a bit of a sense of demand. So do let us know if you're in the US or Canada, you'd like to see direct debit or I think it's called, one one's called direct debit support in the US. Mary Lou has asked, is there a consolidated end of financial year receipt for regular givers? There absolutely is. It's just in your donation summaries section in messages in Raisely. We do send out those consolidated end of financial year receipts, or you can send them out through Raisely. That's absolutely a feature of the platform. They're really beautiful PDF receipts that you can send with a lovely message, which is a chance to report back on your impact for the year for your regular givers. So if you're not sure where that is in Raisely, just get in touch with our support team and they can help you find that. I think there was one other product question. I'm wondering, for the donation form, do you integrate with Microsoft Dynamics? We do not at the moment. We integrate with Razor's Edge NXT, which has got a version 2 of that integration coming soon, and Salesforce. We're hearing more and more charities using Microsoft Dynamics. If you're a charity who uses Dynamics and would like an integration with Raisely, please email in and we'll add your name to the list, and we'll see if there's enough demand there to prioritize something. So thanks, Alex, for that question. And Katrina has asked, are you looking to offer analytics dashboards anytime soon? Martin comes to we have a product sync as a company every month, and Martin comes along to those and is constantly rooting for analytics dashboards. It's actually been wireframed out. We're doing a bunch of research on analytics dashboards, and we hope that we can start to work on actually building analytics dashboards so you can see data like we've presented today in your Raisely admin panel soon. But please, if you're out there and you're like, oh my God, how good would this bit data be for my organization? This would be really impactful. Please write in with that feedback, because it really helps us prioritize. Because really, we want to make sure our engineers are working on things that are going to have the greatest impact for you and your fundraising this year, which is why we asked the first question we did in the poll in the session today.
I promise Katrina is not a pseudonym for myself, Tom.
Yes.
That's blood up.
A few more questions coming through. There's a few questions about pearls being personalized URLs that we could perhaps talk to. There's Ivana's asked kind of the new Raisely is a new platform, interested to implement pearls. What are they? Where do I start? How long does it take? Is it hard? And it's a good question if you're wondering what a pearl is, not a thing that is made by an oyster, but a personalized URL. That is where you pre-fill donor data. So there is less information to capture. And also you can optionally customize the amounts that you ask someone. So for example, if you know through your database that someone is a large giver, they typically donate $200, $300 instead of $50, $60, then you can ask them more on your donation form. Because we know that those amounts on the donation form are incredibly impactful. We hope that in the future, Raisely can do this for you automatically. But if your data is in your CRM, you can put all of that information in a URL and it can personalize your form. It's pretty simple to set up. It usually takes about half an hour to an hour to set up pearls in the way that you want. And our support team can help you through that setup as well. So if you're running appeals, particularly if you're starting to look at March appeals, June appeals, even will probably be setting up soon, then get in touch with our support team and they can tell you how to set those pearls up as well. There were a few questions here. Sarah asked, can you speak to optimization for cost per acquisition versus cost per click on a social? And does everyone report on gross or net when calculating cost per acquisition? Which is an interesting question from Catherine. I'm not a digital advertising expert, and neither is Martin, but the insight we can give here is just that when you're using a platform that optimizes your ad delivery, you want to give them the right signal. And if the signal that you're giving them is that you're optimizing per click, then you're measuring the performance of your ad on the ability for people to click it, not the ability for people to actually sign up to your peer-to-peer campaign or donate to your form. And for that reason, if I just had a ad, I mean, you wouldn't do this, but as an extreme example, if I had an ad that was like cat videos, having a great time in charity activities, and that had absolutely nothing to do with what I was raising, that ad might perform really well on a cost per click basis, but people would get to that page and be like, what? You want me to sign up to something? You want me to donate? And your conversion rate's going to absolutely tank. But because people are clicking on it, it's sending a signal to Facebook, usually, or Google, to optimize your delivery to more people who are really like cat videos, who are going to click on that ad more and more. And that means that they're less and less likely to donate to your campaign. When you optimize by acquisition or result, then you're sending that signal to Meta to be like, oh, this person converted. I want more people like this person. And so you can end up with an ad that has a lower click rate, perhaps even a higher cost per click, but a lower cost per acquisition because the audience is more qualified. Raisely integrates with the Facebook Conversions API, so you can get all of this data coming over to Facebook in a really accurate way, really good matching on this data through. So that's why you should optimize generally for cost per acquisition over cost per click. Martin, are there any questions here that have piqued your interest that you want to run through? Otherwise, we might be almost getting to the end.
There's a couple around donor journeys, which maybe we can, you might want to speak to in terms of like our messages, product, and the journey experience we've put out recently.
That's a good call. Donor journeys are interesting. And I think in the benchmarks webinar last year, we shared that people who use Raisely messages, our built-in marketing automation tools, raise about twice those who don't. And just at the end of last year, I think it was in December, we released templated donor journeys. And so if you go to the messages tab in Raisely, you'll see a whole series of three, we're going to build it out, 3 templates of emails that you can use to adopt as a bit of a best practice template to get you started on your donor journey. And that includes a peer-to-peer fundraiser journey to activate them, encourage that 80% activation rate, and also a donor journey to thank them kind of at multiple points after their gift. So there's 3 templates there. If there's particular templates you'd love to see, let us know and we can build those out as well. But that's probably the best place to start, Jono, and anyone else who's asked about donor journeys. We've had a request for Xero integration, which I think is helpful. Well, I don't know if you've looked into this, Martin. Does your data suggest an average or a sweet spot for the number of touch points we should be aiming for during a peer-to-peer campaign?
Yeah, I think we talked about this last year. So in terms of, there was an association between the number of messages and the amount fundraised. I think this was on campaigns overall rather than specifically on peer-to-peer campaigns. But I think the number was high, and maybe higher than we expected to be, sort of in the plus 10 range in terms of contacting people more than 10 times, or at least sending them more than 10 messages. I think one thing we saw a little bit from our peer-to-peer data is peer-to-peer campaigns tended to be shorter this year. Like most of the fundraising happened in a shorter period than has happened in previous years. And so I think sort of at least once a week, if not more frequently, you want to be contacting your fundraisers who are part of your peer-to-peer campaign. Yeah, and yeah, uh, there are very real maybe concerns or thoughts around we don't want to people to feel fatigued or fundraisers to feel fatigued by communications, but we just don't see too much of that in our data. So I think the encouragement really would be um, get out there and people miss a lot of emails. People don't read a lot of emails. So sometimes you've got to send them five before they see one of them or click on one of them, that kind of thing. And we don't want to be spamming them, but yeah, that can happen.
Staff. I think we're coming up to the end. If there's any final questions, please pop them in the Q&A. Because just clarified there, Martin, those 10 contacts, are they just emails? Do they also include phone and text? I think in our analysis, we were just including what we could see on our platform, which was email and text.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Cool. I think we're nearly at the end here. I think we've answered kind of most of the themes coming through. There are a few questions like, are we able to see if pearls are improving the conversion rates? Can each charity monitor their own conversion rates for each stage of the donation funnel? I think broadly is we don't know the answer for pearls yet, but certainly Raisely's got an integration with Google Analytics 4 that allows you to see every stage in your donation form and your sign up form in a lot of detail. Google Analytics 4 is a pretty advanced product. It can be hard to learn. So we're working on bringing that more of that insight to Raisely via the admin panel in the coming months as we build out those dashboards that I talked a little bit about before. But I think we've kind of covered most of it. So maybe we wrap up there. Any last words? Any last thoughts, Martin?
Or just to say thanks to everyone for the chat really went off and the questions really went off, and it's so wonderful to engage with you all and hear from you all. And I'm sure we'll keep the conversation going other places. And feel free to reach out to me or Tom or support at Raisely. We're really keen to help you in your financial journey.
So keen to help you out. Thanks, Martin, for all your time preparing all of this analysis for us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. As you log off, please fill out the survey to give us feedback on today's session. We'd love to hear what you think. And if you did ask a question that we weren't able to answer today, just email it through to support@raisely.com and we'd love to help you out with it. So really appreciate you all coming along. Good luck with your fundraising plans for 2024. We'll see you around the webinars soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.